Hi, I'm Shalev, and the video that you're about to watch is part of an 8-episode series that dives deep into the story of Revelation from the book of Exodus. So just a heads up, if you haven't watched the earlier episodes, I really recommend starting there. There's a link in the description. Otherwise, buckle up and enjoy this episode.
Okay, we're back for another session together, taking a look at these fascinating series of parallels between Exodus 19, the story of the Revelation, and this really strange story, goats and coats, Yaakov's deception of Esau and Yitzchak. And this time, I'd like to tackle a question which we raised the first time we got together, begin to tackle it, and it is the question of favoritism. There's this, really super competitive race between Jacob and Esau, and father blesses one over the other, and it seems to be this terrible, catastrophic story. And yet, as catastrophic as the Torah itself paints it to be, we seem to reprise the catastrophe with this notion of God favoring Israel over all other nations and revealing himself to them and saying, "You're my special nation." And so why would God make the same mistake that he sees people making and points out so vividly in the Torah?
It's a great question. It's so strange that God would say, "Oh yeah, remember that really terrible story that ended in like a cycle of favoritism and brothers wanted to kill each other and stuff, where one brother was the favored one? Okay, I'm going to do that with you guys, oh Israel, and I'm sure it'll turn out great for you with the rest of the nations." Welcome to A Book Like No Other. A Book Like No Other is a product of Aleph Beta and made possible through the very generous support of Shari and Nathan Lindenbaum. Thank you, Shari and Nathan. So last time, we discovered some pretty unsettling connections between the revelation at Sinai and Jacob's deception of Isaac. I mean, is the Torah really suggesting that God choosing Israel was just another case of problematic favoritism? The kind that tore Isaac's family apart? But Rabbi Fohrman hinted at another possibility, that maybe Revelation wasn't simply repeating that story of deception, but rather redeeming it. Today, he wanted to show me what he meant by that. Now, not to give too much away, but what we're about to see is how these two moments, though generations apart, are part of a much bigger story, one that traces the evolution of chosenness from the very beginning of Genesis, all the way through the end of the Torah itself. To get started, Rabbi Fohrman wanted to zoom in on the story of deception. He wanted to explore the pain of the child who is not chosen and why Isaac would feel compelled to choose one child over the other at all.
Let's go back to Genesis 27. Genesis 27 is a terribly painful story. The Torah goes out of its way to show you exactly how painful it is. It paints Esau, at least the simple shot of the text, as a very sympathetic character, which is hard for some of us to realize. I don't know about you, but I grew up in school and Esau was always the gruff bad guy. He was the one who killed people and he worshiped idolatry all on the same day. And if you actually just go back to the text itself, he seems like a very sympathetic character, somebody who was sent off to do a job, not an easy job, to go out and hunt game and prepare food, and then it all goes to waste. And he finds that his blessing is taken from him, and he cries bitter tears. He just wants to be loved and just wants to be blessed. And he says, okay, fine, so you gave him the blessing, but really, there's no other blessing. And it's like God goes out of his way to make you feel bad for that, bad for him. And part of the aspect of feeling bad for him is that question, Habracha achat hi lecha avi? Do you really only have one blessing for me, my father? That notion that it's like, I don't know about you, Imu, but whenever I read that in the Torah, whenever you get up to that moment when Esau plaintively turns to his father and says, "Do you really only have one blessing in you, father?" It's like you want to scream and just
What's it to you? Of course I have another blessing.
Right, of course I have another blessing.
It's a blessing.
You
blessing
want to tell
is a spiritual
Yitzchak.
concept. You didn't buy a blessing at the store and you only got one.
That's right. And yet the truth is that Isaac really only does have one blessing, because the blessing itself was so particular, was so zero-sum game. The zero-sum game blessing is a situation where to the extent that I lose, you win. And to the extent that you win, I lose. That there can be no win-win situation. And Yitzchak himself admits that that's the nature of the blessing. When he tells when he tells Esau that when he finally gives him a blessing, he says, look, literally it's going to be you or him. And when he's up here, you're down here.
Right.
And
That's
when
really
you're up
interesting.
there, he's down there.
I hadn't noticed that. It's not like he's like, oh, could you bless me too? Isaac kind of, he could say, yeah, of course I could bless you too. Let me bless you also. But he's like, I actually kind of can't. In the sense that you're asking, Esau, I've kind of already given away the blessing of, I guess, leadership, but also dominance.
Exactly.
So dominance is a zero-sum blessing.
Yeah. Dominance is a scary thing.
To ground this idea of it being a zero-sum blessing in the text itself, Rabbi Fohrman had us open up Isaac's blessing and see it inside. And, as it turns out, Rabbi Fohrman had another reason for wanting to look closely at the exact language of Isaac's blessing. He wanted to show me how it seemed to resemble the language of an even earlier blessing in the Torah. Let's turn to Isaac's blessing to Jacob in Genesis 27, verses 28 and 29.
God should give you from the dew of the heavens, the fat of the earth, rov dagan v'tirosh, so much produce, beautiful. Verse 29, Ya'avducha amim, nations should serve you. Yishtachavu lecha leumim, and bow to you. Heve gvir le'achicha, v'yishtachavu lecha bnei imecha, but you'll be a dominator over your brother. And the sons of your mother will bow to you. It's family, right? Your own family. Your brothers will bow to you. And then he continues, Orecha rur nevarchecha baruch. Those who curse you will be cursed. Those who bless you will be blessed.
Exactly. It's a pretty stark blessing. Now, Imu, as you listen to that blessing, does it remind you in any way of an earlier blessing that you've heard in the Torah? When Yitzchak says, Orarecha arur umevarchecha baruch, those who curse you shall be cursed, those who bless you shall be blessed. But
that's Abraham.
He didn't come up with that. That's Abraham.
That's Abraham's blessing.
But Imu, is that really Abraham's blessing? Look back at Abraham's blessing and tell me if that was really it. Abraham's blessing appears in the beginning of chapter 12.
Okay. God says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. And I'll bless you. And I will make your name great. And you will be a blessing. That's new. And I will bless those who bless you. And those that curse you will be cursed. And then through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So the blessing, the object of the blessing is not Abraham. It's actually the nations, the mishpachot adamah, the families of the earth. And Abraham is the conduit.
That's right. Everything is leading up to this climactic last sentence. Listen to how it builds. I'm going to make you into a great nation. Oh, really? And that nation is going to be blessed. I'm going to bless you. And Agad Lashmecha, your name is going to be great. It's going to be this amazing nation. And then mysteriously, it's going to be Hayeh Bracha. What does that mean? It's going to be a source of blessing somehow. Well, what does that really mean? Oh, well, here's what it means. Avarcha mevarchacha umekalelcha aor. I'm going to bless those who bless you, umekalelcha aor. And I'm going to curse those who curse you. So, and v'nivrachu b'cha, through you will be blessed. Kol mishpachot adama. All of humanity is going to be blessed.
This is a take on chosenness, right? Like,
yes.
Because here he's being elevated for the sake of being the special nation that's the conduit for blessing for the entire world. And in this sense, you have Dad, God, who's not interested in this kid more than the other kids. He's got a special job for this kid because Dad really loves some people. Who does Dad love? Kol mishpachot adamah.
While I personally found this read of Abraham's blessing very compelling, it was definitely a novel read of the text. And it turned out that what was nudging Rabbi Fohrman to read the blessing this way wasn't just the words of the text, but was also the larger context in which God gave this blessing. To get the whole story, I would really recommend listening to Rabbi Fohrman's series called A Brief History of the World, followed by a second series called Abraham's Journey. You can find the links to both in the show notes. But Rabbi Fohrman summarized some of the key points for us. Key points that provide important context as to why God chooses to give the blessing of this special mission to only one person, one nation, and at this very specific moment in both history and in the Torah's narrative.
Where do the families of the earth come from if you're in Genesis 12? There's a historical context to this. There's a reason why God comes to Abraham at this particular moment of history. Because what
11.
just happened in Genesis 11?
The tower.
The tower. Abraham lives in the shadow of the tower. You see, God always wanted a relationship with all of humanity, and he had it for the first 11 chapters of Genesis. He had it with Adam, he had it with Cain and Abel, he had it with all of their descendants. And then things didn't work out, so he started over with the flood, but God still had a relationship with everybody. But 10 generations go by, and something happens. It's the Tower of Babel. Somehow in the Tower of Babel, humanity, which is one humanity, Vayu Kol Haaretz Safa Echad, one large nation, right? Somehow they use that incredible blessing of unity in some sort of destructive way. And then God makes a fateful decision to destroy the tower, but not just to destroy the tower, to scatter humanity. And in scattering humanity, nations are born. Nations living all through, no longer unified, living all over the place with their own languages and their own cultures and their own wars between one another. And all of a sudden, the families of the nations of the earth are born. The families of the nations of the earth get born in Genesis 11. And in Genesis 12, God says, there's got to be a new game plan. I no longer can have a unified relationship, a one-on-one relationship with all of humanity. I have to pick a family, build it into a nation. But the problem is I'm not interested in just that family and just that nation. I'm still interested in humanity. Here's my plan. Establish a model society based upon the way I teach you to live. And if you do that, then you know what? Those who choose to model themselves after you, I'll bless. And those who choose to curse you and say, who needs that? Well, they're not going to have that blessing. They'll get cursed. Basically, if you take this model of what it means to live a godly life, if Israel can manage to live up to that model, they give the nations of the earth something concrete, something actually that they can look at and say, we can do some of this too. And through that model, blessing will come and filter to all of the families of the earth. That was Abraham's blessing.
So Abraham's blessing isn't a zero-sum blessing. In fact, it seems like it's exactly the opposite. And yet Isaac's blessing does seem zero-sum, even though it goes out of its way to call back to Abraham's blessing. Makes you wonder, what's going on with Isaac's blessing? Why the change?
And at some level, Isaac is trying to give it over, but he doesn't quite give it over the way God gave it over to Abraham. And the key to understanding the difference, he misunderstands. The key to understanding the difference starts with his inversion of verse 3 in Genesis 12. God, when he talks about blessings and curses, which does he put first, blessing or curse?
Blessings.
I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Now turn to Isaac's blessing. When Isaac seems to quote these words to Jacob, what does he do with the words?
He inverts them. He says, those who curse you will be
Those
cursed.
who curse you, will curse. Those who
It's
bless you, will bless.
protectionist. It's like isolationist.
Exactly. You see, for God, what's most important? What's important for God is it's all about blessing.
The
I'm
families of the earth.
trying to bless everyone, all the families of the earth. So the main thing is that if you establish yourself as a model nation, then anybody who emulates you will be blessed. By the way, you should know that I'm sure there'll be some people who are jealous and angry of you. I can't control people. I'm not going to go and mess with people's free will. There's going to be some nations that'll say, who needs them? All right, so they won't get blessings. So they'll get cursed instead because they're cutting off their leg despite despite themselves. Right.
Cutting
But
off
for
their
God,
nose despite
it's
their face.
right. So I've got to protect you from them. Right. But that's not the point. The point isn't protecting you. The point is that through you, blessing should come to the world. But Isaac inverts it. Why does Isaac invert that? Because for Isaac, the main thing is those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed is ancillary. Now, for Isaac, why would that be the main thing? Those who curse you will be cursed. Why is that so important to him?
He must feel threatened, and
Exactly.
I'm not sure why, but it also kind of explains why he's interested in Esau as a choice over Yaakov, because he picks the strong man. So I think this goes back to a piece you have here in Aleph Beta and a claim you make in your Genesis book, I believe, but
Right.
that you ask why it is that Yitzchak favored Esau in the first place, and you make a convincing case that what Yitzchak admired about Esau was his sense of doing, the fact that he was a gibor, the fact that he was a hunter, he was a man of the field. And it's, Yaakov as the cute kid in the tent, may have made for a great wise advisor and king's counselor, but not exactly the guy you want to lead the nation, right? You want the strong king.
He picks the strong man, and his vision of Israel is as the great international strong man.
Mm-hmm.
And what feeling does the strong man inspire in everyone else?
At its best, the strong man inspires safety and security, but most of the time, the strong man inspires fear.
And if the strong man inspires fear and jealousy, then how do I keep, in the words of Star Wars, the outer systems in line? Fear will keep the outer systems in line. Those who curse you will be cursed, right? You'll have this great divine protection.
Okay, so just as a sidebar, if the arguments that we're making about why Yitzchak favored Esav over Yaakov is making you somewhat uncomfortable, I've been there. Rabbi Fohrman made these arguments almost a decade ago, and when I first heard them, boy, did they not sit well with me. The full scope of the evidence and why Rabbi Fohrman makes these arguments is something Rabbi Fohrman covered in his Parsha book, in a Toldos essay. And I really, really want everybody to understand why Rabbi Fohrman argues this. So we're going to put a link to that article in our show notes. Please take a read, and hopefully you'll understand a lot more of the grounding as to why Rabbi Fohrman chooses to read the story this way. It's actually pretty compelling, but it takes some time to digest. It's going to be really foundational for the rest of the season. Anyway, if you're feeling uncomfortable, just know I've been there. All right, back to our discussion. So, having observed this key shift in Isaac's blessing, the way he was taking Abraham's universalist blessing and changing it to an exclusive and isolationist blessing, what Rabbi Fohrman wanted to do was really dig into both blessings, side by side, and see in even more ways how, beat by beat, Isaac was drawing from Abraham's blessing, but ultimately distorting it.
It's almost like you can actually take Abraham's blessing and look at how that blessing transforms itself in the blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob, and you'll see stuff that reminds you of Abraham's blessing, but is a certain kind of interpretation of Abraham's blessing. Imu, I'll read from Yaakov's blessing. You keep your hand on Genesis 12 on Abraham's blessing. You tell me, does any of this remind you of an interpretation of a part of Abraham's blessing? Let God grant you from the dews of the heavens and the fats of the earth lots of grain and wine. This would be an interpretation of what aspect of Abraham's blessing?
Maybe making you a goy gadol.
Yes, making you a goy gadol. How are you going to be a goy gadol?
You're going to have a lot of food. If you have a lot of food, you can have a lot of kids.
Exactly. If you have a land that's fertile and abundant, you can become a goy gadol. So Jacob is
because right now you're nothing. You're just one dude.
That's right. You're just one dude. So how are you going to become this Goy Gadol, you're going to become Goy Gadol through resources.
Give you a lot of resources. Yeah.
I'm going to give you the land. The land is going to make you into a Goy Gadol. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ya'avducha amin v'yishtachavu lecha amin. Nations will serve you. They will bow to you. Havigvir la'achacha, you're going to master over your brother. What, if anything, in Abraham's blessing does that remind you of?
Probably v'agadla shemecha.
It's an interpretation of Agadla Shmecha. If you have a really great name, if you have a great name, one interpretation of that is everyone's going to bow to you and everyone's going to serve you. That is one interpretation of it, but it's not the only interpretation. What else could Agadla Shmecha mean? You'll be a great nation and your name will be very great.
I mean, you'll be famous, you'll be well known, but the Dalai Lama is pretty famous and well known.
That's right. That's right. So you don't necessarily need to be dominant. But what happens is Isaac imposes a zero-sum vision upon this blessing. And crucially, there's one aspect of Abraham's blessing he doesn't relate to at all. And what's that?
It's both. I mean, it's the same concept. It's v'heyeh bracha and v'nivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot adama. It's
exactly
your blessedness in relation to others. Are you a conduit of blessing to others? Are you a blessing to others? Neither of those elements are present in Yitzchak's blessing to his own son.
It's as if that's been closed out. Abraham's blessing is there without the whole point of it, which is, and the whole point is, you're creating this model nation that's going to be this conduit to filter blessing to all of the Mishpachot Adama. You see, Abraham's blessing was not a zero-sum blessing. It was just there so that you could be a conduit to my love of all nations. The whole reason why you're important is because of them. If you look at Genesis 27, I would argue, is a corrupted version of Abraham's blessing.
Examining Abraham's blessing side by side with Isaac's blessing had revealed a whole new way to think about chosenness. Up until now, we had been automatically linking chosenness to favoritism, almost using those two words interchangeably. But perhaps that reflected Isaac's distorted understanding of chosenness, and not God's vision of chosenness as being a conduit to bring love and blessing to all the nations. If that's the case, that Isaac somehow misunderstood God's blessing, then wouldn't God want to correct that misunderstanding? And right away? Well, that's what Rabbi Fohrman suggests happens next in the story. Right after Jacob receives the blessing from Isaac, he runs away from his parents' house and ends up falling asleep in Bethel. God visits him in a dream, that famous dream of the ladder, and God speaks to Jacob, perhaps to set the record straight about this blessing.
Imu, it's fascinating. Because now look at Genesis 28. If Jacob stole this blessing and, ran away and is going on the lamb, I would have expected in Genesis 28 that if God is going to appear to Jacob, that the very first thing he would say to Jacob is, Jacob, right? What would you say if you were God? Right? You wouldn't give me a dream of the ladder. What dream would you give me?
I mean, if I were God, I'd come and be like, well, you have a responsibility here. You need to be the conduit of blessing to the rest of the world. This isn't about you.
What do you have? God comes to Jacob and says, in essence, are you sure your father Isaac told you the truth about Abraham's blessing? Did he tell you everything
he corrects
in that
it.
blessing?
Oh my gosh, I never realized this. He corrects it.
Look at what he says, the missing piece. Read verse 14.
Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you're going to expand into all directions. By the way, and you'll be the conduit of blessing. Through you, blessing will come to all the families of the earth, and
That's
not
right.
just through you, but also through your descendants.
That's right. So know what it's all about.
You can see that expansion of the Zaracha in the beginning of that verse. Like, you're going to have kids and you're going to go expand this way, that way, that way. Wow, great. Me. If the job of the Zera is B'nivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot adama, they're the shock troops. They're
That's right.
We don't want just one
They're
conduit.
the ones that are going to make it happen.
Yeah, we're going to have conduits of blessing that'll be like this dust of the earth, and they're going to go everywhere.
Exactly.
It was really fascinating that God seemed to address and correct Isaac's distortion of Abraham's blessing almost immediately after Jacob received it. showing how Jacob and then his descendants were meant to properly embody and live this blessing. But while we're speaking of Yaakov's descendants and their future roles as recipients of the blessing, that actually brings us full circle to Exodus and the children of Israel, the children of Yaakov, at the revelation at Sinai. With this backstory about the blessing in mind, Rabbi Fohrman thought we were now ready to re-examine the parallels between revelation and deception that we saw last time, and perhaps understand how chosenness at revelation is not just a replay of the damaging favoritism we saw in the deception story, but in fact, redeeming it. And to explain how all of this would work, Rabbi Fohrman was reminded of a sign that we used to have on the walls of the Aleph Beta offices. It had a pithy little phrase that would guide us for how to think about these challenging parallels in a new way.
You know, Emu, we used to have a little sign up hanging around the Aleph Beta offices. Remember, but choose a different ending. And that idea, remember, but choose a different ending, really gives a whole different take to intertextual parallels. It suggests that it's not necessarily the case that the reason why the Torah ties two stories together is because it's saying the same story is happening again. There's always two possibilities. Either the same thing is happening or the opposite thing is happening.
It's nuanced because it's not like this is a fixing. There are aspects of it that are the same, and there are aspects of it that are
exactly
an elevation or a correction.
That's right. And I want to suggest that that's also true with favoritism. With favoritism, there is a sense in which the story of Revelation is exactly the same as it was with Jacob and Esau. And there's a sense in which the story is exactly the opposite. Let's turn to Revelation. In Revelation, God is now going to actually anoint this nation and make them special and make them favorite the same way that Jacob or Esau was all supposed to be favorite. But it's going to get changed. Remember, but choose a different ending. So let's read it, right? So what does God say? God picks up actually in a fascinating thing. You see, in the original Genesis 27, there was another zero-sum game going on in the story besides the actual blessing. It was a zero-sum game between two parents. Isaac was not on the same page as Rebekah was. Isaac says something to Esau, who he loves, and Rebekah says something to Jacob, who she loves. Isaac says, Sana kelecha telecha v'kashtecha. Go pick up your bow and pick up your arrows, and then go hunt some game, v'haviali, and bring it back to me. That's what he says to Esau, the one that he loves, so that he can bless him. But Rebekah, who wants to make sure that Jacob's the one who gets blessed and not Esau, says, Va'ata b'ni shma b'koli l'asher anoim b'tzaveh. You now needs to listen to my voice, to that which I command you. You should go to the sheep, and you should make your own little delicacies, and you should bring them to the father, so you can get the blessing instead of Esau. They're in tension with one another. Now look at what happens in Revelation. Who is God mimicking in Revelation? Isaac or Rebekah? Let's read verse 4. And I've lifted you up on wings of eagles and brought you to me. Now, Emu, in our first session, we mentioned that he was channeling someone when he said that. Who was he channeling?
He was channeling Isaac commanding Esau.
Isaac commanding Esau. When Isaac says, Va'ata sana kelecha telecha v'kashtecha, pick up your bow and arrow with your feathered arrow that flies through the air, v'haviali, and bring me some food. So God was saying, no, I take this predatory animal and I bring you to me, right? It's evoking Isaac to Esau. But the very next sentence, verse 5, who is God evoking? Va'ata im shamoa tishmu b'koli. And now, if you listen to my voice, ushmartem et briti, who is he evoking now? Who said, Va'ata im shama b'koli? And now, listen to my voice. Back in Genesis 27.
This is Rebekah.
That's Rebekah. God is not choosing between Rebekah and Isaac. He's integrating them. Isaac was talking to Esau. Rebekah is talking to Jacob. What's happening with God? Nominally, he's talking to the children of Jacob, to children of Israel, but really, he's talking to the whole world. He's talking to the Esavs of the world too. Listen to what he says. Now, if you listen to my voice and you observe my commandments, vitem li skula, you'll be treasured to me. I'll love you. Mikol amim, from all the nations. But why? Ki li kol haaretz, indeed I own the whole world, and li kol haaretz, and I care about the whole world. I would read ki li kol haaretz not necessarily in terms of possession, but it's also, I care about the whole world. It's mine. So if it's mine, don't tell me I shouldn't care about what's mine.
You don't need that line, right? If you just try and understand what this line means on its own, unrelated to our intertextual parallels or anything, right? If you listen to my voice, and if you keep my covenants, then you will be treasured to me amongst all the nations. Because all the earth is mine. What is because all the earth is mine?
Yeah.
It's not because all the earth is mine, you will be treasured to me.
That's right.
I need you to be treasured from all the other nations because I have a role for you as it relates to the entire earth.
Exactly. And I care about all of that. Of course, I care about everything that's mine. Everyone belongs to him. All nations belong to me. They're all mine. I love them. They're my children.
So let's play skeptic and say, no, that you're whitewashing this. Can't mean that. God is saying, I'm picking you as the best from amongst all the other nations.
And no
Forget
one else,
about how to read.
no one else matters.
Right.
And now we get to the next verse. Va'atem, and you guys, that one nation, you know what your role is? Tili mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. You'll be a special, separate nation whose job is to be a kingdom of priests. Well, what does a priest do? A priest's whole point is to be able to connect people to the divine. The same way that you're going to have priests that help you connect to the divine, you're going to be a kingdom of priests that help all the other children connect to the divine, just like I told Abraham, v'nivruchu b'cha kol mishpachot adama, and just like I told Jacob to correct him. And now I'm making good on the correction.
The kingdom of priests thing is so good. The point of a priest is to minister to someone. You can't all be ministering to yourselves, right? Like you're ministering to everyone else. The point of the priest is to connect between everyone else and their God. And you're the nation of priests to the other nations.
Exactly. So what you have here is remember, but choose a different ending. God says, remember your past. Remember that blessing you got from Isaac. But I, God, have the right to modify it. And I am modifying it. And you better understood what I told your forefather Jacob. This is about you being there for all nations of the world. That's the whole reason why you're getting revelation. I'm teaching you something that ultimately you need to teach the world. By way of example, somehow Isaac didn't pay attention to that aspect of you. And your blessing was all the physicality of the land, but none of the mission of the land. Through the way that you live in the land, all nations are going to look at you and you're going to become blessed and you're going to bless them. That is the blessing that I'm reasserting now, God says. That's what Revelation is all about.
So we see at Revelation, God redeeming the corruption of chosenness that happened at deception, redeeming two separate parents showing favoritism to two separate children by God's integrating these parents as the one heavenly parent, and by choosing all of his children, by singling out one nation to bring them all close to him. It seemed to be the most elegant read of Revelation, a fascinating take on chosenness, and a beautiful charge to the people of Israel. But Rabbi Fohrman was not done yet. He still had one more text for us to examine. He suspected that this read of Revelation and this perspective on chosenness was supported by an even later blessing in the Torah, the final blessing of Moshe, given at the very end of the Torah, a blessing that shares a vision of the end of history. To see if this take on Revelation and chosenness was indeed reflected in Moshe's final blessing, Rabbi Fohrman had us turn to the concluding verses of the entire Torah.
And now look at the end of the Torah. V'zot habracha asher berach Moshe ish Elokim et bnei Yisrael lifnei moto. And this is the blessing that Moses blessed Israel before he died. Vayamar, he says, Hashem mi Sinai ba. In the future, God will come from Sinai, as if there will be another Sinai experience. V'zarach mi seir lamo. God's going to come from Sinai, but he's going to come from another mountain too. Whose mountain?
Seir.
Whose
Esau.
mountain is Seir?
This
He's
is the
going to come
unification
from
of Israel and Esau.
God's not going to come from Sinai. He's going to come from Esau's mountain, and not just Esau's mountain. Hophia me Har Paran. He's going to come from Har Paran. Who lives in Har Paran? Not Esau, not Israel, but another dispossessed child, Ishmael. Ishmael goes to
The wilderness of Paran.
to the wilderness of Paran. God's going to come from all three mountains, from Israel, from Ishmael's mountain, from Esau's mountain. All the brothers are going to come together. He's going to come from 10,000 holy points. Mimino eshtas lamo. And in his right hand, he's going to be holding this fiery Torah. Af chovev amin. Even as he loves all nations.
All nations.
Kol kedoshav
kedoshav
biyadecha.
biyadecha.
He will hold the holy ones that were separated, Israel, in his hands. Behem tu kula raglech, and all these nations will be arrayed at his feet. Yisami dabrotecha, but together will uphold all of God's commandments, all of God's laws. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. It's true that God gave us the Torah, Morasha Kilat Yaakov, and was an inheritance that was given to the family of Jacob, but for what purpose? Ultimately, that all could be the upholders of God's values. Vayhi Yeshurun Melech. And so when a king comes to Yeshurun, either the Messiah or perhaps God in his revelations, B'tasef Rashi Am, when the heads of all nations and some
United
sort of
Nations.
grand United Nations, Yachad, together with Shiftei Yisrael, together with the tribes of Israel. This is the prologue to the blessings of every individual tribe, this universal moment in history when all nations will come together. This is the blessing of the Nivruchu B'cha Kol Mishpat Adama. It is the messianic ideal. It goes all the way back to the founding of the nation in the times of Abraham and stretches all the way to the end of the Torah, to its vision of the future. And the key waypoints in the middle is the moment when the blessing underwent a subtle corruption in Genesis 27, the correction of it in Genesis 28 to Yaakov, and then the beginning of the building of that correction in the real world in Revelation, and the story that we have in Exodus 19.
It's very cool and a very compelling vision, and one we don't know that much about or talk that much about, but is redemptive in its non-zero sum message, and makes sense, right? Like, actually, God is not like, oh, I'm going to take from this vision of a dad who picked his favorite kid because you're my favorite Israel. He's said, okay, I see how this could go wrong, and I'm going to elevate it. I'm actually going to take, what you may fight for, which is this idea of, oh, I want to be the favorite, or I want to be the chosen child, and understand that I'm dad. I'm actually the father. And if I'm the father, then all the nations are my kids. And I don't love one kid. I love all my kids.
Yes, it is true that you're favored, but the only reason why you're favored is because of the role you play for all of my kids. If you can help me connect all of my kids, boy, that's special. I'll be very indebted to you for that. Do you think you can do that for me? That's the role that God wants out of Jacob in Revelation.
Stepping back from our discussion, it was so powerful to see how those connections between revelation and deception that we initially found so uncomfortable had led us on a totally fascinating journey, one that not only shed a new light on chosenness, but on a possible vision of the end of days itself. And with that, I assumed that our learning for this season had come to an end. But here's the thing about intertextual connections in the Torah. They're rarely just about one idea. And after this session was over, Rabbi Fohrman and I continued to explore these parallels between Sinai and the blessing of Jacob, because Rabbi Fohrman had actually found a lot more parallels that he wanted to show me. And not just a few more, like 20 more. And they don't just stay in Exodus 19, they continue right into one of the most important moments in the entire Torah, the giving of the 10 Commandments themselves. Now, why would the story of Jacob and Esau be woven into the fabric of the 10 Commandments? And what could these additional parallels tell us about this foundational moment of revelation? Well, that's where we're headed next. Now, something that I'm particularly excited about is that for these coming episodes, we actually tried something a little different. A different style than we've done in this show in the past. We'll get into it more next time, but we've decided to leave in a lot more of the conversation between Rabbi Fohrman and myself in order to really bring you into the chavrusa, to make you feel like you're part of the exploration and discovery in what I think is a really exciting way. It's a bit of a wild ride, but I think you'll like it. Until then, thanks for listening.
Hi again. I'm guessing that many of you might be here looking to prepare for Shavuos, maybe to give a Dvar Torah at the table, and you might be wondering, hey, wait, how many more episodes are there to this thing? And I totally get it, right? I have a 32-step cheesecake to make. So if you're actually looking for something a bit shorter that's gonna help you prepare for Shavuos, guess what? AlephBeta.org has a collection of specially animated Shavuos videos for you that are only around an hour long in length. Visit AlephBeta.org and let the inspiration begin.